So now, let us begin.
Fantastic.
Welcome.
This is great.
This is my beginning. I don't have a special, exciting young lady like you do. Welcome. My name is Stephen Anderson. I am the Outback hypnotist, and this is Hypnosis in Action. Today, I have with me. I think you are my first fellow podcaster.
I'm honoured. I'm honoured.
This is show number 32 or 33. I haven't decided yet. But I don't think I've taken anyone out with me who is a podcaster at all in any fashion. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Podcasting in cars without coffee.
Without coffee.
It's a show.
That's where it all began, you know. Seinfeld began this, and then that late night show guy started singing in cars.
James, yeah.
Yes. And I blatantly stole the idea.
I love
him
the idea.
Because I figure if you're going to own a smart car for two that's camouflaged brown and orange, what else could you do with it?
Will other cars see us on the road?
That's amazing.
my question.
The number of times I think people just haven't seen me. But lots of people will see us, believe me. There's no doubt about that.
It looks great. It looks great. I love the branding and it's very cool. Very cool.
Now, you told me before that you started your life in a shop. Your family ran the shop, and generally back in the, was it 70s or 80s?
Yeah, it was the 80s.
In the 80s, so pretty much you lived there.
We did have a separate house, but we did have accommodation on the milk bar as well. And that was our life. At the age of 7, I was an entrepreneur with Dad and Mum, and it was probably the best business course I ever could have done. It was amazing. They let me run the bread stand, and so I would go out and help the tip-top man bring the bread in, and
Right.
he'd throw an extra loaf in, and then when the customers would come in, I knew what bread they would eat, so I would put that on the counter, and they'd give me a tip, and so I was amazed how effective that customer service was from a very early age.
Where was your milk bar?
Yeah, in Pascoe Vale, Cumberland, 159 Cumberland Road, Pascoe Vale in Melbourne, and
Right.
it's a cafe now. So, but
I asked
fond
that
memories.
question because you talk about them giving you a tip, which is very anti-Australian. Is that because you were 7 years old?
Well, I hope it was a bit of both, but I probably played that to my advantage. I think they just enjoyed the fact that a 7-year-old was providing better service than most adults. So I think that was that definitely came into play. But I found that, you know, you could be kind and still be savvy and get a good result even at that age. And you know, $2 worth of mixed lollies back then went a long way.
Well, that's right.
So
that is right. Always been in business for yourself?
Did stand-up comedy at the age of 17 after being inspired by Robin Williams and Good Morning Vietnam. I saw that film, and I remember my parents were going through a divorce at that stage, and you know, it just wasn't the greatest of times. But he made everything better, even war. And I walked out of that cinema going, I'm going to do that. And it was just, there was something about it that it just brought lightness to every decision I ever made. And I always chose to look for the light rather than looking for the problem in things. I like solving problems, but I'd always look towards the light. So that optimism bias that I carry definitely came from Robin Williams. And, you know, when he passed away, it was like losing a parent to me. It was quite tragic.
My story with Robin Williams, I gave up, I don't know how long ago, but it's a long time ago. I gave up commercial television, commercial radio, after being a talkback junkie for many, many years and really just becoming angry because of it. So I just stopped, and I've started listening to podcasts, and terrifyingly Netflix has appeared in my life. So I'm nowhere near as smart as I thought I was. But my eldest daughter called one day, and because they talk to me and say, ask me a question, and I'd go, I don't know, because I didn't listen to what was happening in the world around me, which I actually think was a good thing. And my daughter rang and she said, look, I know you don't, so I thought you needed to know that Robin Williams has died.
Yeah.
And that was one of two things in, I think it was 7 years of no commercial television or radio, that I actually felt important to know.
Yeah.
You know?
And my wife rang me about it, and her tone, you know when someone pauses before they're about to give bad news?
Yeah.
That was the exact tone as if a parent had passed away. It was, and because she knew how much that meant and how that had dictated the way my life evolved. And, you know, if only Robin could have heard our two stories. It's like, you know, it's, but again, I think all things in good moderation, right? For all he's very good, there are obviously a lot of demons, and it's, you know, it's a sad end to a wonderful, inspiring life in many ways too. So
the demons seem to be there in his profession. They seem to be there for a lot of them in his profession, and that was your profession at one stage. Tell me, did you feel any of those demons?
Well, definitely. I felt self-doubt, and I felt very introverted at school. I was always very good at the couple of subjects I was interested in, and terrible at the rest because I couldn't find relevancy. But for me, what it did do was bring me out of my shell. Where I was very, very fortunate is there was a massive drug culture in the stand-up comedy world.
Yes.
And the comedians kept me out of that. So they wouldn't let me into the inner sanctum. And that was, in one way, that's a blessing, because if you have self-doubt, you want to belong and you want approval, and you would probably go into that mix. So I was fortunate. I had sport, which I loved.
Does it look like a police car? Sorry.
No, it looks suspicious.
It does, doesn't it?
I mean, we're only doing 90 in a 40 zone. I mean,
you wouldn't believe how many times I've actually been busted in this. Sorry, I just.
They just wanted to take a picture.
I looked down at the speedo and thought, we're doing 60 and it's actually a 40 zone. I better do something.
I like to actually take pictures of them while I'm driving, and that's because they have to stay there now. No.
So how long did you do that?
Yeah, well, I did stand up from the age of 17 through to 24 years of age, and got to the point where I had an agency, Up Tempo at the time, and they were booking me MC gigs, and you know, you go to all nice places like Hoffham and sports clubs, and there was something. It was interesting when I was 24. I thought it was strange. I was earning more money than a lot of my friends at that time doing something I liked. But I still had that issue with criticism. Like, that's something that's dissolved over the years. But at that time, you know, for the one person that didn't like you, you'd hold that to heart, as opposed to, and comedy is a great thing, because if you get 51% of the room, you've got the room. You build momentum through laughter, and it rolls through a room. And it's like, but it's amazing at that time. Two things. I took to heart the one person that was always super critical, that was never going to like me anyway. And the other thing is, people kept saying, when are you going to get a real job? And that was, and so, you know, that's a great way to give up on your dreams, right there, kids. But that's what I did. I got a real job and did probably the most serious thing I could have done, and joined the Westpac Bank at the time. And that was totally, so I felt like it was such a strange feeling. I felt like, oh, now I'm doing the thing that I'm supposed to do from a society standard, but not from a personal standard. But yet my skill set's in stand-up, and I was running stand-up nights as well in the Yarra Valley, the Launch Laugh, and I brought humour back to the Yarra Valley in Melbourne. It was a pretty serious place at the time. So, but so that was really my involvement, and that all came out of a program I did, which was What Works, and that enabled me to visualise things I wanted in my life at the age of 17. And that's how I thought, why not give comedy a crack? If it wasn't for that What Works course where they worked on visualization and then putting it into action and running, my project was to run a stand-up night, and that changed everything. That was like, oh my goodness, I had my mates on the door, excuse me, collecting money. I had my friends. I remember my mum watching me for the first time and bringing a washing basket full of clothes, dirty washing, to the Launch Laugh and sending it through the crowd and doing things, you know, that was just so eclectic. And but that really did help me. All those business skills through the Milk Barn comedy helped me in my roles in Westpac
So
then,
from comedy to banking, there's a little bit of irony in that, is there not?
It's cruel almost when I say it. It's it couldn't have gone in more of an opposite direction, and the feeling of society approval and getting recognition from my girlfriend's family at the time was remarkable. The pats on the back, and yet I'm going, oh, this is it for the next 50 years? I go, surely not. And I had very fortunate mentors that had come through the bank that I met that, you know, Marty, do you really want to run seventh by floating in life and just doing this? And I wasn't, you know, I was probably performing at 50% capacity because it wasn't my passion. And but I met Andy Meikle, who was a coach at the time, an athlete, and he said, Marty, don't finish seventh. Really, if you're going to be here, be the best you could be here. And instead of watching Jerry Springer at lunchtime, and which for people who don't remember, it's when rainbows were black and white, Jerry Springer. But it transformed my perspective, and I thought... Can
you explain that? When rainbows were black and white?
Well, that's going back. That's right. The 90s,
okay.
right?
Okay, so, got it. Okay.
The kids...
I saw some sort of a gay reference there, and I'm trying to think, was Jerry Springer gay? I didn't hear that.
It would have been a nice reference.
Yeah.
I think we can work it there. Yeah. But it was really interesting because I think, it did change my perspective to then model the top performers within the bank. And pretty much within 6 months, I had three new jobs in the bank, and I doubled my salary. And then I started Mortgage First with a friend of mine when mortgage broking first was introduced around 99, 2000. And but that lightheartedness carried me through. I would always run and host functions for the bank, and it was amazing. And I had a guy, Charlie Heary, who was in a wheelchair. He was a very clever person, but used to sit opposite to me, and he goes, Marty, you just don't belong here. He goes, I'm not sure what you're meant to do, but you're not meant to be here. And I'm going, what are these people seeing that I'm not seeing? And that was really powerful to me when Andy said that to me. I was the only one that really, from what I could tell in that group, took on his advice. And I remember him telling a story about the guy that got locked in a fridge on the train fridge and froze to death, and he analysed what it was like.
And the thing wasn't on.
And that, as a 28-year-old, that really impacted the importance of mindset, and then it's been a personal development discovery throughout that time, ongoing. But that was, but that lightheartedness, that ability to bring that a person feeling better for meeting you, was really a superpower that I probably didn't even recognise that I had at the time. But that's what I always look at, to add value instead of take value. And that was a real benefit in having people work in my businesses and engaging with people, I think, in general.
So tell me about when you were little, when you were 7 and younger. Did you just start the cafe at 7, or did you grow up from there?
Yeah, it was.
Not you start, your parents start.
Yeah, no, before 7, it's funny how my mind really slips into that milk bar phase as the start. But I remember before that, I used to love going to Yarra Junction in the Yarra Valley with my grandparents. We lived in Camberfield in Melbourne at that time, and it was kind of like the Bronx, really. There was, we were Croatians, there were Greeks, there were Lebanese, and we had bars on the windows back then, and I never understood why we had bars on the windows, but it was probably a pretty interesting time, and I'd seen guns at an early age, and I think never lived with fear of that or anything. It was more just that's how it was. And I remember my parents, the conversations didn't get smarter, they got louder, because you had Croatian and German, so it was sort of a Yugo-Germ mix that was pretty volatile. But yet we always had food on the table, there was always care. But I loved going to Yarra Junction with my grandparents. My grandmother and grandfather were my matriarchs, and they would sell plants at the local markets, and they'd have 3/4 of an acre, and I'd do the plants with grandma, and it was just a wonderful time, really, growing up with them. I really, the work was still work,
Yeah.
So I loved that playtime. It was like really important for me. But that's what I can remember. I think I probably formulated a bit of a love of food at that age, because whenever I was upset, I was force-fed food. So weight's always been my challenge. It's I gave up alcohol, I gave up coffee, but weight's always one that was, because in our culture it was always you celebrate with big cups and big plates, and so portion size, always an issue still to this day.
Croatian and German. Do you still hold any of the language?
Yeah, ich kann sprechen Deutsch. I can speak a little bit of German, more so than Croatian. I only know the swear words, obviously,
right,
and as Dad would call them out. Like nemo bacāt pas is don't throw the dog, which was a very important phrase because Dad would get angry with the dog, so we would always say that. And kako veliki baba, which is how big is grandma, was one that sort of stood out as something humorous, and our grandmother was very big.
Okay.
But they're the two phases. They're the two. But German, we spoke quite a bit of because we had relatives come out. The Croatians couldn't afford it, unfortunately, with our family. But yeah, we had a lot of Germans come out and stay with us.
So you must have come just. Look, my relationships, I guess, with Croatian, Bosnian, is some people who have worked for me. And my best friend growing up, his father was what at the time was called Yugoslavian.
Yes.
And I don't know which he was, because at the time the two states were supposedly one.
Yes.
And and so what am I trying to say? The two states seem to be very much like I'm Irish, like the north and the south of Ireland, very much disliking each other, but forced to be one. Is that something that you grew up with?
Yeah, well, Dad in particular was very Croatian orientated, obviously, but it's all based on religion and the hypocrisy.
Again, the Christian.
Yeah,
okay.
I found it very hypocritical until I went there. Like I had very good friends that were Serbian and Croatian and Bosnian and Australian, so I never really had any issues at all. Dad would, but when I went over to Croatia in '99, he took me to the cemetery, and Vidakovic, which is my full name, is like Smith over there.
Right.
And he took me to the cemetery and I saw all these rows of Vidakovic tombstones, and then I got it, and he goes, how can you expect me to like them when this is what has happened to our family?
Yeah.
And I understood it at a human level then for him, because he's very family orientated. But to this day, personally, I don't have any if people treat me well, I treat them well, and vice versa. So I don't. It did make an impact, but it didn't cause me to have any hatred towards it or anything. I just thought, wow, I just get where Dad's coming from, which is probably the most important. But it was pretty volatile there. Dad's actually just going back. He's 78, and he's reliving his youth, I'm sure. But he's going back there in May, so I'm really proud of him for having the initiative to do that at 78 and spending 3 months in his home country. So
3 months, that sounds fabulous.
Yeah.
Siblings?
Yeah, one sister, Lisa, 5 years younger. Same sense of humour.
How would you classify your sense of humour?
Eclectic. I think I laugh at things that I shouldn't laugh at in probably society's eyes, but I find it allows me to have conversations that I wouldn't usually have. So I would say it's eclectic. It's probably a bit raw, but it's relevant as well. It's usually looking for the good in something that doesn't feel very good, and that's something that I've found has been very resourceful for me as a person.
Yeah.
And I've always tried to share that with people, particularly in business, because anything can happen in business. And I think if I can get them smiling, I can get them to solve the problem much more effectively. So, yeah.
And Lisa, would she accept her big brother being protective over her?
I don't think so. I think she's very independent and she's a very strong woman. I think she likes when I edify her. There's a bit of a thrill she has. I like when I say that's a really good idea. But she's very independent. I don't think she would allow me to protect. She's the fixer of the family.
Yep.
If anything, she'd want to care for me. But she also needs care and sometimes doesn't realise that as an independent lady. But she's very resourceful, very medical minded. But yeah, I can get her laughing, and I'm one of the few.
Oh, I'm one of the few.
Yeah,
Okay.
We have an innate sense of humour that, you know, we can laugh at a commercial that's really not funny because we can pick something out that's just strange, and we like that. That intimacy in humour is wonderful because it's between two people, even though you can have wider audiences. But that intimacy in humour is, I think, a wonderful thing in rapport and connection with people.
Is that something you used when you were actually doing humour for a living? Are you now doing humour for a living, now that you have this podcast?
Yeah, you see snippets of it. I wouldn't say that I'm working in the area of comedy as such, but you definitely, if you see my content on LinkedIn and in the podcast, you'll see that light-hearted nature. But it's more, that's what it is now.
Yeah.
So it's, I did rehearse, I went to a rehearsal on Australia's Got Talent.
Oh, yeah.
And because I was going through a midlife opportunity, I call it, and I just saw the ad and I thought, well, why not? And the one thing I had forgotten, because I didn't get up on stage until I did the rehearsal, but I'd forgotten about timing and rhythm. And that is what you get when you're in front of audiences. And I practiced it, so I probably knew the material better than I have ever known any material that I did. But I could sense that the timing and rhythm was off.
Yeah. And
I know they could sense it too. But I was proud to do it because it was sort of an itch that I just wanted to scratch. And it was just, I didn't want to go back to doing comedy clubs, which says to me, I don't love it enough to go and explore it. But it was just good to do it, just as a thrill and just the preparation. It reminded me of the things I did well in business and the structures and looking for something left of field in perspective. And it's different at 47 than it was to 24. Because back then, my only life, bless you.
Thank you.
My only life experiences was, probably alcohol, sex and comedy. So, and that you have a limited vocab, but it certainly expanded beyond that.
Tell me about your mum.
Yeah, Mum's an interesting one. Mum, she, for me, it's challenging to talk about Mum because she has two sides, and she has the scorpion side, which is you have to be watchful of, and she has this loving side as well. So there's always food on the table.
So she's born somewhere around the 23rd of October?
Close, I think 29th of September.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so, but she, she went through real difficulties. She was 22 stone and went on this Beverly Hills diet and lost like 14 stone, and that affected her mentally. But she was also on Duramin, which they banned, and you're only supposed to be on Duramin, which is sort of a stress relief hormonal thing, for 3 months, and she was on it for 20 years.
Oh.
And it really affected her mentally at the age of late 30s, and she went a bit psycho and did crazy things, and was kicking my sister for wanting to have a shower and just doing some really bad stuff and really aggressive and angry. And so I left to live with Dad at the age of 7, I think it was 16, and we lived in a caravan because we were building a property. And we had those showers where you click the hose in. There used to be toy showers in the middle of winter, freezing to death. And Yeah, but Mum caused a lot of angst at that stage, but she's recuperated and recovered to the point where, you know, she's now very amicable and, you know, is loving. But it's one of those things, there's a propensity for that anger occasionally. And my sister and I can still be very scared of it, but we now, like, strangely enough, I'll approach fire with fire, because it's also, it can be cowardly as well. So when I remember getting a phone call when I was 40, and because I didn't pick up the phone, she was really aggressive with me. How dare you not pick up the phone? I'm your mother. So I just went at her and said, look, I speak to people all around the world, and the way you're talking to me is like a dog, and I'm certainly not a dog. And I said, you have to make the decision as to whether you want a son. And that was a really tough, I called it, because I wasn't going to put up with that. I wouldn't put up with that with anyone, let alone my mother. So that was really powerful in so many different ways. But look, you love your mum, but it doesn't mean you always have to agree with the behaviour, right? So it's one of those things where I manage it like a business, and now it's kind of managed itself, because we've set up a third area where we can both go into and operate in, which is nice, because we can have a relationship. But at that stage, I was quite comfortable to walk away from that. I wouldn't have had I wouldn't have thought any differently of myself to do that. So
managed it like a business.
Yes, I had to, because I had to take it out of the emotion. Because the fact that it was my mother means you sometimes can be that 5-year-old child, right? And so what I had to do is take leadership in my own life and ensure that I wasn't getting, you know, dictated to and suppressed, and, you know, just took that anger and went within myself. So it was a really important moment, I think, for the family, and Mum has always treated me very differently after that day. And but I know the propensity's there, but she manages it herself. And these are the areas where we can come together, and we stay within those areas, and we can be loving within those areas, and it works. So,
what other things in your life do you manage like a business that aren't business?
See, it's very different with my wife and my son. It's a really good question. Sometimes friendships can fall into being an associate. That's always an interesting area for me, because I've got great friends, and sometimes I look at it, the extension of that as being associates, but yet then I can miss out on friendships because I'm kind of managing it that way. So I think, you know, that could be a trust thing. You know, you build your fortress and you have your team, and that's what it is. But I've got a lot better at that, particularly in the last 7 years. I think in my 30s, I pretty much managed my whole life as a business. And I think that's not sustainable, because you miss out on the enrichment of life and the enrichment of friendships and engagement at that human level, as opposed to having the business first and then backtracking it. So I've come back to looking at the human elements and then expanding from that foundation. I find that much more fulfilling. That comes with wisdom, Stephen.
comes with wisdom.
And experience, I think, more so than anything.
And you've backtracked over the last 7 years. Why 7?
I think that was... I realised that I was good at business. I was good at business, and I was good at relating with people within their framework. But when it was outside of that, when people were talking about their beans that they're growing in the backyard, I would discount them very quickly, because it sort of didn't fit in my plan. And yet, they've been some of the great conversations I've had in the last 7 years. And I think that's my nature, is to have those conversations. And I think what I had done is I really built a fortress about having the approval of doing something significant in business. To the I probably discounted myself and how I love to naturally operate. So I've been much more open in the last 7 years, and I've just enjoyed that. And I've enjoyed people for the fact that they're people and their intricacies, and everyone has something valuable to bring to the table if you're not looking at it from purely one context.
Yeah.
So I think my vision's widened, and it was never them that was the issue. It was the context of how I was looking at things. And don't get me wrong, I picked up some great resources in that, and I've had some great times and had a lot of fun in that. But it was there was a fulfillment issue that was starting to happen, and there was an overwhelm issue in regards to that as well. And I was missing the bigger picture, which to me is that human connection side of it.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely opened up in the last 7 years, and I've done a lot of personal development, probably from the age of 32. It's all layers. It opens up, and I'm enjoying that, and I keep enjoying that. Keep enjoying what I'm finding.
So you love learning?
I do. I love learning about myself and others. That instigated the podcast, where interesting people do remarkable things. It's like interesting can be anything, and people have their own remarkability if they're prepared to take a look inside, and so often they neglect it. And I love seeing that in someone, and I love bringing that out in someone, including myself. I realise all the things that I thought were very weird and didn't fit the box is very much my talent and my gift, and I've appreciated that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I was scared of it because I kept, any form of criticism to it because it didn't fit was taken to heart, and in the early days. And I think that's what I love learning. I've uncovered who I really am. I'm much more comfortable with that than ever before. I think there's obviously still growing to do. There always will be, but I'm enjoying that process. I really am.
This criticism, unable to accept, unwilling to accept criticism, keeps coming back into our conversation. Big part of your life.
Yeah, I think I was criticised early on. Lots of different things spring to mind, but as I said early on, I said the conversations didn't get smarter when you were solving problems in our family, they got louder.
Yeah.
So for instance, if I'm helping Dad put a plasterboard up to help him build the house, I would get told off for doing it wrong with never having been shown how to do it.
Yeah.
So that brought up a lot of fear in trying things in the early days. And I found that I carried that same fear that all people were going to be the same. So that keeps you in a bubble. What Robin Williams did is totally break me out of that, but then I still had that. As the more success I got, the more criticism comes with that, because you've seen more and you're delivering more out in the market. And that still came back to be a factor. And now it's interesting because I encourage people on LinkedIn to troll me, because it's almost like a superpower, and I'm helping people in dealing with criticism, because I broke through that at around that 40 stage. But I think that was that direct conversation with Mum and a similar conversation with Dad in standing up and going, you know what, I will be who I want to be and who I am, and not be at the mercy of everyone that opens their mouth.
Yeah.
And that was a big shift and allowed me to be much more comfortable. And that, but I think people in general, criticism is a factor, and that holds them back. So for me, it's about how can I continue to express myself fully and see where that takes me without that fear. And I go, it still pops up its head occasionally, but now I know how to deal with it. I go, oh, there you are. Thank you for arising, and let's now move through.
Okay, give me for example.
Well, the Australia's Got Talent.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have been a thing I would have done 5 years ago, because there was too much to lose with the identity of the business I created.
Yeah.
And I go, why not? Why not? But it came up for one split second, but there was a pull through, and that was the difference. Whereas before it would have been a drawback, and there was a pull through and going, well, let's go and have the experience. How would you know if you're not going to have the experience? So it was like that itty bitty shitty committee on your shoulder. All of a sudden, the voice was lowered, and there was a new voice that was available that I could draw upon, which was always there and just been dulled and quiet and suppressed.
Oh, which was always there. The new voice that you could draw upon was always there.
It was always there from very young. It always knew intuitively, but it was all the external factors that made me second guess and doubt my own voice. And that was when I have that intuitive feeling, like a crazy person, I'll say it out loud. And because I need to hear it, because it's there, so I don't hold it in. And that's usually where conceptually I'll get really great ideas out of that by allowing that voice to actually express itself.
Do you believe that everyone has that good voice inside them?
Yeah, I think it's trained out of them. I think that's where I'm helping a lot of people, is getting back in touch with that. Everyone has that voice inside of them. It's just been layered with dirt, and society is an interesting one. I think you could look at it in two ways, as an opportunity or a delusion. And I think we get fed a lot of messages that aren't always to the individual's benefit.
No.
And I think you want to have that voice to know what's right for you and how you're going to express yourself in the opportunity of the world we live in. And I think that's invaluable, to look at life in that way. And I look at my son Charlie, and if he wants to know about dinosaurs, he'll immerse himself in dinosaurs. And if I get in the way of that, I can give him resources to enhance that learning opportunity. But if I start going, well, you said that wrong, or that's not the right name, and take away from his experience, then all of a sudden that stops the momentum of learning. And I go, we've always been trained to find the right answer externally, instead of going, well, what's right for us as a person? What gives us meaning? What gives us significance? And, sometimes maybe we think we don't deserve to, or maybe we think we're not worthy of that voice. I've been on two sides of the fence with that, experiencing both, and we're definitely worthy and we're definitely deserved. And that's where magic sounds like such a esoteric word, but that's the word that comes up. There's a magic in that, and a uniqueness, and I think that's the wonderful thing to draw out of people. And that's, people say, how did you get everyone to be top 15% of industry in finance, in mortgage broking? And I go, because it was always beyond the transaction. It was always about the development of bringing out the person's best self. And in that, I had to demonstrate that in my own learning and my own discovery, because the business will never outperform me if I've started it. So really, I'm a big fan of personal development, and really encouraging. It's amazing through encouragement and enlightenment in regards to learning and self-discovery what people find. And the rest is just the development of skill in the area you're focusing in. But if you get people to that point where they're excited about their own lives and they're discovering and surprising themselves, it's a wonderful feeling. I love that feeling. I love surprising myself. It's joyous.
Okay. Surprising yourself. How have you surprised yourself just recently?
Definitely, I know it sounds silly, I come back to the same thing, but definitely Australia's Got Talent.
Okay.
That was a big surprise.
As I say, I don't watch commercial TV.
Yeah.
So I was of the belief that Australia's Got Talent was something that's well and truly in the past, and I was thinking that was an experience that was well and truly in the past. I'm starting to think it was just in the last few months.
Well, it was. They're bringing it back.
Okay.
So it's like, I think it's coming on in May or June. But to do that was a massive surprise. I firewalked.
Oh, okay. Was that with Tony Robbins?
No, Kurek Ashley,
right,
who's a good friend of mine, turned out now to be a good friend now I've got to know him. And that was a wonderful experience. That wouldn't be something I would have done probably 6 or 7 years ago again, because I go, why wouldn't you walk around it? Or levitate, find a way.
Yeah.
But it was, again, and that had a profound effect on me in regards to, we had to write down any limitations that we felt that we had. So it's really good to get it out on a page. And then we had to write down what that had cost us. in our lives, and then we had to future project that to the end of our life.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then the goals seemed pretty cool. You know, so that was a really interesting process to go through. And then, you know, all the things that I want to achieve just felt wonderful. But it was an interesting process to actually put it out on the page. Very metaphoric, of course, but to put it out on the page and just burn them and put them to the side and send them off. So it was great. It was really good. But I never thought I would have done that. Like, I would have done a skit on, you know, Tony Robovich, Croatian's first demotivational coach, and, you know, having the firewalk turn into a bushfire and everyone get torched. Yeah. But that's what I would have done. Yeah. You know, that would have been me. But to actually go into the experience and see how authentic Correct was in delivering and how much care. There was 22 people. It was intimate group. It was wonderful, and I saw the transformations in that room, and it was quite extraordinary to see. And even 6 months later, seeing the impact of people's lives through that experience, I thought, what a wonderful experience to have been a part of. Yeah.
Cool. Where to from now?
Great question, and it's the first time I probably haven't got an answer, because it's I have this thing of it unfolding at the moment, which is the first time I set myself small goals that I want to achieve, 3-day goals. Mm-hmm. So I'm very much on an expression and momentum play. I'm loving doing the podcast. I'm loving meeting people. I'm loving mentoring people. But it's been interesting from the point that I've got equity share in businesses as an advisor that have come out of doing content. I've never seen content as an asset before. But all of a sudden there's this brave new world of content and podcasting which is growing. And I think it's growing it's predicted by BBC in the UK there's going to be 3 times as big as it is now in 2021. It's evolving. And I go, it's an interesting area, and I'm letting it unfold, and I'm just looking for opportunities within those areas. But they seem to be coming to me, and that's the first time. I've always had to create opportunities, whereas now I'm just being myself and doing my content, doing my podcasting, which I'm enjoying, and these things are opening up. So I'm kind of not wanting to put a specific goal on it at the moment.
Yeah. Okay.
That might change, but at the moment.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to be totally and completely about me right now.
Great.
You're one. For this podcast, I do very little, if any, research. With you, I've actually done a little bit.
Thank you.
I have listened to your podcast. I've done a few things like that. I think I've worked out where we are. This is very exciting. One of the things you do is help people who are doing podcasts.
Yes.
Give me some advice. You've now been through what I do.
In what area are you wanting advice in regards to podcasts? Is there a specific challenge?
Oh, look, there's always the normal ones.
Yep.
You know, the motivation, you know, that type of thing. The little devil in the back of the mind saying all the horrible things. No, I want to know in the structure, in what I'm doing, is it something that you think's worthwhile to listen to?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you got to look at it as first the trouble I had when I started as a hobby on a dare, so I had to reinvent the business on the back end. And I would say, even in regards to sponsorship, don't think about getting $20 per 1,000 listens like some people do. Find someone that's really in alignment with your podcast, so you can generate a good revenue split for anyone that comes through one sponsor. So I think that's a really interesting area, and I've got one that's coming on board, Book Speakers Direct, which is in alignment because I get a lot of people that I interview that are actually speakers as well.
Yeah, it is in alignment, isn't it?
So there's a nice alignment, and I held off on sponsors because I didn't want to be just like every other podcaster and get $20 per 1,000 listens. I just didn't see the value in that structure. So I would say get one really great sponsor that you can earn $600 or $700 up to $1,000 per referral off it, because then you're generating a revenue off it. So if we're talking business here, the other thing is workshops, 1 or 2 day workshops. If you have an interest in that, that's very lucrative in regards to funneling opportunity through the podcast into monetizing your podcast in your area of interest,
right,
whatever that may be. So that's really important. I think my structure has been pretty loose, I would have to say,
right,
because from the point of view, it was really a self-discovery dare at the start, and now it's formalizing into a business. And the difference is now I'm thinking commercially about it, and where it can go, and even just approaches from Mamma Mia to see whether you'd be interested in doing a couple of things here and there. So I can see the expansion in regards to public speaking. This is all happening in regards to the podcast. But I think you're really it sounds boring, but it's just about being yourself and giving your best self. But if you could niche your podcast, that's why I love Outback Hypnosis. Because I'm too global. I've had to niche on the back end. I think you really want to niche, and that's where you get your listener base and your tribe and your followers. I think niching is the key to really funneling that into a business, and to have a strategy of. So for me, for instance, LinkedIn is my shop front. That's where people see me, they get to know me, build a bit of trust, hopefully put out some good content, and then once they come into the podcast.
So you're a blogger as well?
No.
So it's all podcast.
Yeah, it's all video. And so LinkedIn's my shop front. People have a look, and then they come into the podcast. That's my store, and then from there, there's opportunities to develop deeper relationships and into the buying process, into the various things. So that's been my funnel that I've, very simple, but it works for me in establishing a good email list, and and then buyers that want to be a part of your tribe that are getting value. So that's it's interesting to have to think about it in reverse. Now, if I was starting, I would have probably done something more commercial, like Simply Podcast, and interview podcasters, and then work out a funnel from there into the podcasting world. But I would strategically niche. But I was inspired by Tim Ferriss and James Altucher show, and that's why it was the Marty Vids Show.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you wanted to get across to me today?
You've asked a lot of great questions, and I've talked a lot, haven't I?
You've talked a lot. That's what.
Is this what this is about?
That's what this is about.
See, I love the car experiences. No, there's I think you've covered everything. I think it's a nice wide range conversation across so many things, and probably some things I certainly haven't spoken about before. So very good questions.
So if you would look into that camera, tell people who you are, where they can find you, and of course go straight for your niche of people.
Well, I'm Marty Vids, host of the Marty Vids Show Podcast. I'm a podcast mentor. I'm a business mentor. I simplify, amplify, electrify your podcast and your business. And you can find me on LinkedIn. Connect with me at LinkedIn and the Marty Vids Show on Apple iTunes. But it's been a pleasure.